everyone, and welcome to the Fossil Stories live webcast in the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History FossiLab. My name is Grace Costantino, and I'm the Outreach and Communication Manager for the Biodiversity Heritage Library, or BHL. And as I mentioned, this webcast is part of BHL's Fossil Story social media campaign, which is going on all this week, October 13 through 16, 2015. The campaign explores the history of paleontology and provides lots of great fossil information, so be sure to follow the hashtag Fossil Stories all week for more great fossil fun and information about other webcasts that we'll be doing later in the week. But now, let's dig into our webcast here in the Fossil Lab, and I'd like to introduce you all to the star of our show, which is Advait Jakar, who is a volunteer here in the Fossil Lab, who's going to be telling us a little bit about some of the work that they do here. So,
as you mentioned, my name is Advait Jakar. I'm a doctoral student at George Mason University and a research student and a volunteer here at the Smithsonian. I've had a diverse background. I've studied things from frogs to fish, but now I study mammals in the Pleistocene. But I do some smaller side projects here in the Fossil Lab, some of which involve dinosaurs. So if we can come over here, these are some of the projects that we do here in the Fossil Lab. Some of them include sorting through small fossils that were found in the Hell Creek and Lance formations. This, interestingly, is a historical collection. These specimens were collected by O.C. Marsh, who's one of the founders of American paleontology. In addition to work like this, we do a lot of collections and curatorial support here in the Fossil Lab. For example, we have a number of rehousing projects going on here. What that means is that we take specimens which were in our collections and then we house them in these protective casings so that they can be preserved for posterity. This is a sea cow from the Calvert Cliffs, which is now in a foam jacket. So what this will do is that it will protect it from any damage in the gores and the collections.
Great. So I understand a lot of your work now deals with fossil teeth. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it does. So I'm going to go back to this box right here. So all of these animals here lived alongside T-Rex and Triceratops in the Lance Formation, which is a formation ranging from about 68 to 66 million years in time. And what we see here is a bunch of small animals, things like fish, salamanders, lizards, turtles, crocs, and smaller dinosaurs. The interesting thing about this period of time in this formation is that most of what we know about these small theropods or meat-eating dinosaurs comes from their teeth. So we don't actually know how many species there were, but what I'm trying to do is try to see if I can use these teeth to try and figure out how many species there are. And the way I do it is like this, or that we call a dromaeosaur. Now, we don't know exactly what species of dromaeosaur this is, but the shape of the tooth is generally like the shape of other dromaeosaurs. And to give you an example of what a dromaeosaur is, it's kind of like a velociraptor that you might have seen in Jurassic Park. So what I'll do here is first take a picture of this tooth, and once I have this picture, I'm going to go into a program called ImageJ, and open up pictures of these teeth. Then what I'm going to do is take measurements of these teeth. Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So once I take all of these measurements, I'm going to throw those into a computer program which will then run an analysis for me. And what this should do is cluster out teeth which are similar in shape. Now, the number of clusters should tell me how many different kinds of tooth types there are. And since we're basing our classification on these tooth types, this should give us some indication of the number of species of these small meat-eating dinosaurs. So This is the basic process involved in trying to quantify the number of species based on these teeth. This is also useful if we find more isolated teeth, because then we can just take these measurements and throw them into this analysis, and then that should help us figure out what kind of dinosaur that tooth belonged to.
Great. So can you show us a couple of examples of different teeth in the boxes over there?
Yes, I can.
Great.
So alongside T-Rex, we had a lot of smaller dinosaurs. For example, that was a thing that we think is a dromaeosaur. This is something that is called Ricardoestesia gilmorii, and it's really based on the shape of the tooth, which is slightly different than the shape of a dromaeosaur. You also get other things like Ricardoestesia isosceles, which has this long pointed tooth, and based on the shape of the tooth, we think it might have fed on fish. So the shape of this tooth is very different from the shape of some of the other teeth, which might indicate that this is a separate species.
And then I understand that the teeth in here represent both species that have gone extinct as well as some forms that have persisted.
Yes, they do, and that's actually one of the most important things about a collection like this. Microfossils can provide a lot of important information about the diversity of this time and place. For example, we've got plenty of fish here, which can tell us something about the ecosystem, that it had a lot of streams and lakes. What this can also tell us is something about the process of extinction and who survives. So here we have vertebrae from a gar. Now, a gar is a fish which is still alive today. It's not the same species, but it's the same kind of fish. So we know that gars were these highly successful animals which persisted through the KPG mass extinction, which wiped out most of the dinosaurs. Another cool thing that we see in these collections is a collection of mammal teeth. So mammals are the dominant form of terrestrial life today, but back then they consisted of these really, really tiny animals, kind of like shrews and rats. And the dominant form of life back then was the dinosaurs.
Very cool. So I understand that with some of your work, you're also trying to determine the size of the animal and the amount of time that they persisted in the geological record with these teeth. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so for part of my PhD, I'm trying to figure out if the body size of an animal predisposes it to going extinct. So in the recent past, we've seen a lot of large mammals going extinct. And the question this research group that I'm a part of is interested in asking is this a general trend that is seen through time, or is this just something that is seen today and something that might be attributable to humans? So let's go over here and look at this horse jaw. So it turns out that the body size in a lot of mammals correlates with the size of the molars. So what I do here is measure the length and the width of these molars using my calipers, and then I calculate the area of the tooth. And the area scales with the size of the body. So I can get an estimate of how big this animal was. We can also use the fossil record to see when a species first appeared and when it last appeared, which will give us the temporal range of that species in geologic time. Now, if it so happens that everything that was large also had a small temporal duration in the fossil record, then that might indicate that large things are might be more specialized and might be more predisposed to going extinct than small things. But if we don't find that trend through time, and if that is a peculiarity of the present, then that might say something about the impact that we are having on the planet today.
Great, so that leads really well into my next question. Why is it important to get answers to questions like these about teeth?
So teeth are actually really informative, and they can tell us a lot about what kind of species this animal was, how big of an animal it was, what sort of food that this animal ate, and doing some of these analyses can help answer some fundamental ecological questions about extinction, about body size evolution. And about the impact people are having on this planet.
Great. And I want to remind everybody that this is a live webcast, so feel free to send in your questions. We're going to be answering those later on, and we have a couple more questions now for Ed but be sure to send in your questions as well. So my next question for you, how does the Biodiversity Heritage Library support your work?
So part of my PhD is about this one historical collection from India. So I'm trying to figure out how animals in the Pleistocene, this is a period where we got successive ice ages, how this period of time affected changes in mammal communities. And I'm focusing on India because it's a part of the world which hasn't been studied as much. There's actually a great collection of specimens from the Sivalik Hills from India, housed in the Museum of Natural History in England, and some of these specimens were collected by Hugh Falconer and Captain Cotley, who were citizens of the UK who were in India in the 1800s. Now, sometimes you don't find a lot of locality information or the information on how old the specimens were just by looking at the fossils. So I'm going to have to go through the historical literature and find some of that information. And the easiest way for me to do that, sitting in the United States, is to go online to the BHL and see if any of the papers that Faulkner and Cotley had published are on the web. And BHL is great at publishing these old manuscripts. So here is a paper on Cibotherium giganteum, which is this giraffe that was alive in the Sivaliks in the Pleistocene. It kind of looks like a dinosaur if you just look at the skull, but this was indeed a giraffe, and it's got a great set of teeth which are preserved as well. Now, if I didn't have the time to go over to the UK and measure its teeth, Faulkner and Cotley actually did the work for me. And in their papers, they published a list of measurements of the teeth. What I can now do is take the length and the breadth and calculate the area from that, and then figure out how large this animal was. So resources like the BHL help me tremendously for the work that I'm trying to do, especially when it comes to historical collections.
Great. Now I know that this next question is a little bit hard, but do you have a favorite fossil?
This is a very, very hard question. I think I am most fascinated by transitional forms in evolution, things like Archaeopteryx or Tiktaalik or Hycoichthys. So Hycoichthys is the earliest vertebrate or thing with a backbone that we see in the fossil record. Archaeopteryx is one of the earliest dinosaurs with fully formed wings and feathers. And Tiktaalik represents a transitional form between a fish and an animal that could walk on land. And these fossils can tell us a lot about how evolution works and about how these evolutionary novelties like flight and walking on land have evolved and have originated.
Very cool. So at this point, we can take a couple questions from the audience. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Erin Rushing, Outreach Librarian, Smithsonian Library. She's been keeping track of your questions. Erin, do we have some for?
We had a question earlier in the broadcast when you were describing some of these tiny little teeth here about what the sizes of the animals that they would correspond to.
So we have everything. So this tooth here belongs to a juvenile T-Rex. So this thing was, I don't know, probably about 15 feet long or so. A fully grown T-Rex could get to be about 40 to 45 feet in length. Some of these smaller dinosaurs that I was talking about earlier, like the dromaeosaurs, would be about 6 or 7 feet in length. So about my length.
Any other questions, Aaron, so far?
One was a little tongue-in-cheek. Should we save all of our baby teeth?
If you would like to, they might make good souvenirs. But for the fossil record, baby teeth are actually quite informative, especially for mammals. And we can learn a lot about tooth evolution by looking at tooth replacement.
I know I saw a question on Twitter whether we had any fossil plant specimens here in the lab.
We don't at the moment, but we do a lot of work on the fossil plants in this lab.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we have just a couple more minutes left, so be sure to send in any questions that you have, and this might be a good opportunity to look at some of the other cool things that are in the lab here. So I notice a very large bone over here. What can you tell us about this guy?
So this is part of the tibia or the shin bone from a dinosaur. This probably belonged to a duck-billed dinosaur, and it was found in Montana from a formation called the Hell Creek Formation. Now this formation, like the lands, is from about 68 to 66 million years in age, and represents the last time of the age of the dinosaurs. So this was one of the last dinosaurs present in North America just before the asteroid hit.
Very cool. And I just saw another question. What does the color coding that we see in the box here represent?
It's not really color coding. It's any post-it that I could find at the time when I was sorting through and classifying these small fossils.
So these were fossils that were already in the Smithsonian's collection, and you just had to go through and sort and determine what they were?
Yeah. So Marsh and Hatcher went out to this formation in, I think, 1889. And sometimes what's cool is that with these collections, we get old postage notes like this. This is a note for O.C. Marsh, Yale College, New Haven, Connecticut, and it says, return if not delivered to J.B. Hatcher, who was the collector. These were found by them, and they were stored at Yale, and they slowly came down to the Smithsonian, and they were just there in our collections. And since they're from this very, very interesting period of time, it was an interesting project to go and sort through them, figure out what the diversity of life was back then in this place and time.
Cool. So how much time does that represent in the box as far as your time sorting them out? How long did that take?
Oh, so this took me about a year and a half. And it's not just these 3 boxes. I've got 7 drawers full of similar boxes that I've gone in and sorted and classified.
So I saw another question. Somebody was wondering if we have any DNA preserved in amber from around the time period that these fossils are from, like you see in Jurassic Park.
Not that I know of. So DNA actually decays really, really fast. I think the oldest DNA, from what I know, is about 200,000 years old. And beyond that, tissues start to degrade. But what scientists have found is some evidence of soft tissue in dinosaur bones.
Great. And then last question that we have time for, I just saw a question, do you collaborate with other natural history museums on your work here?
On my work, sure. I collaborate with people at the Natural History Museum in England. and with people here.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Advait, for showing us around the fossil. I want to remind everybody to follow the hashtag Fossil Stories all week for more great fossil information, and we'll have 2 more live webcasts with the American Museum of Natural History and the Natural History Museum Los Angeles later this week. So thanks very much for tuning in. Thanks very much to the FossiLab staff for hosting us, and we hope to see you on social media this week for more great fossil fun.